Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today to talk about esoteric astrology. Um, well, basically, the speakers that went before me did my introduction for me. So there's more time to get to the essence of what I was going to say. So I will start by repeating that esoteric astrology is essentially the science of relationships. This implies that there are two beings in any event, at least two beings that are being related. Let's say that one of these beings is a human being and the other is a planet or a solar system, or even further than that, maybe a system of stars or solar systems, a constellation. Um, this is to say that when we're talking about esoteric astrology, we are always implying events that are taking place between beings and in the context of other larger beings, larger lives. Um, this is a good thing to keep in mind because very often it is easy to slip into materialism when one ventures into esoteric astrology or astrology of any sort. And by this, what I mean to say is that obviously we can observe the physical universe, and in late centuries, the magnetic universe and the electrical universe, and in some extent, radiation. But astrology, in the minds of most of the people who are interested in it, including myself up to a certain point, is very much dominated by the observation of the motions of physical stuff. However, this is a very limiting concept since when we are talking about beings, we have to assume that these beings, no matter their size, be it a person or a group of people, up to a galaxy or a solar system, they also have objective motions. There is their emotional or sensitive side, there is their reasonable size or mental side, and these physical observation cannot accurately map out. That is why intuition has to come into play. I am I am underlining this because we very often seek to explain the objective by starting at the material, but this is destined to be a fragmentary answer because always what is subtler and finer will pervade and to a certain extent dictate what is more gross. After this became a realization in my research and in my effort to translate esoteric astrology knowledge to information that could actually be applied to a human person's life or a group's endeavors on our planet, I started relying more upon the fact that within us, since birth, we have the type of substances that would respond to any type of substance there is in the universe. By exploring this approach further, what one can do is escape the domination of the physical and rather venture into a more qualitative approach, in the sense that a person in relation to their development or their ventures or their pursuits at certain stages in their life will be able to come into contact with certain types of energies that are already quite well mapped out for us in the material of esoteric astrology and the astrological tradition that already exists. Of course, that needs a modern translation, but that is something that everyone is doing. What I'm trying to say is that it is quite limiting to approach esoteric astrology as if there is an on-off switch that says now this energy is available, we're working with that, then that energy is available. What we are told is that esoteric astrology is about the energies and forces that are available throughout the universe and by the means of the etheric plane and the etheric bodies of all forms reach us at all times. So it's really a question of what one is doing, of what one wills to do, and what there is available to work with. And that is dictated not so much about what the physical bodies of the lives that are the sources of these energies are doing, but more about what the person who wants to come into contact with these waves of energy, or I should rather say conscious contacts with these waves of energy, is a position to use to do the things that are planned for them. To this end, I have tried to approach the subject from two sides. One of them is by venturing deeper into the study of the progressive horoscope, which is a very good way to come into contact with a timeline way larger and way more extensive and expansive than that of the personality. And the way this timeline, which might refer to the ego or higher self or soul, as one may call it, relates to the timeline of everyday life, of the personality life, and seeking to see what the soul provides in order to inform the personality of what needs to be done. That's not easy to do. We all know that.
So it's around 8 minutes, that is, Evangelia, but
okay, I'll wrap up.
Wind that up a little bit now.
Yes. And the other side of this approach was to venture deeper into the study of the creative hierarchies, which we are told are the lives that embody, that energize, that constitute, and that move everything there is in manifestation as they move through the etheric plane. I think these two approaches may be promising in the days to come, and of course I welcome feedback, or anyone else who is studying these type of things. Thank you.
Thanks, Evangelia. That's very clear and interesting to know your approach. Before we get into our discussion about that, we'll bring Ted straight in and hear what he has to say. Okay, Ted.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Don't think I've ever spoken to this many people in one go. I'm going to start with a quote which meant a lot to me in 1997. In the rubble caused by Pluto, look for the signs of Vulcan. Pluto represents the will of the unconscious, Vulcan the will of the superconscious. That soul will which is trying to impress itself upon the dominant personality. Now, Pluto can destroy. Part of its ray complement is first ray destroyer aspect. It can destroy the personal will. But without the will of the soul to replace it, then anarchy and chaos can result, because Vulcan's hammer must eventually control. And it's been very interesting that I've been watching since 2008, the transit of this planet Pluto, cleansing and purifying, but destroying on its journey through Capricorn, which it started in January 2008. And as a serious astrologer, or I like to think I am, I could see that we were going to hit a world crisis in sometime in 2020, and went on a tour of certain lodges in England in 2019 to say, we're going to be facing something very serious in 2020, and we know what that is now. And I did a detailed article of this, and thank you, Christine, you published it in The Beacon last year. So the details are there. And if you're interested, my view is that Pluto will continue to cause transformation by destroying those parts of forms that humanity have built that are not required any longer, and they do it in personal lives, as I've just alluded to as well, until 2025, when it goes into Aquarius, which is a time that the Tibetan talks about maybe the end of the transition period, and the wave of a new wave of fourth ray souls coming in to guide a new renaissance, certainly in Europe. So this idea of Pluto is descriptive of my situation in 1997, a year of personal trauma, but I was introduced at that time to Dr. Douglas Baker. He is an esotericist who's written over 100 books, and prior to his death in 2011 had spoke to 15,000 lectures worldwide. Now, what was interesting was that I got the esoteric astrology that I practice from Douglas Baker. He was formulating a new astrology based esoteric in nature and based exclusively on the esoteric rulerships of the Tibetan, as laid down in a treatise on the Seven Rays, Volume 3. Now, the two main features of this astrology are morphology, which is shape related to function, brings in the importance of symbolism and the higher mind, and also parsing, which is translation of words, lower mind, into symbol and image, higher mind. And so we can see from those two capacities, they require the development of higher manas. And this is the quality of mind just below the vibration of buddhi, which of course is implicit in our conference keynote. And this idea is that we're occultists, we're working bottom up. And so the development and subsequent use of higher manas aids in the construction of the Rainbow Bridge, Jacob's Ladder, the Antakarana. And Dr. Baker himself saw this function of the emerging astrology as far more significant than even interpreting horoscopes for personal use. And it was this education of the mind in moving from lower to higher, which would enable higher manas. Remember the link between the personality of lower mind and the lower part of the soul as higher mind leads through to buddhi. The new astrology computes signs for personality, soul, and monad. Is it possible, Dominic, to have a look at the sheet, please, the first sheet? And we can see there, and we can have questions on this, two triangles there. If we look at the one, as you look at it on the left-hand side, that happens to be my own energy matrix, a Taurus personality, a Leo soul, and a Scorpio monad. And I've made a comment there that as it happens with me, they're all fixed signs. It wouldn't necessarily be the case, but they're all fixed signs there, which indicate a third ray approach or knowledge in order to get fusion of those three together. The mutable signs relate more to the second ray and the love fusion, and it's not indicated there, but the triangle of cardinal signs would indicate a first ray approach. And you can work out your own, if you know your rising sign, you know your sun sign, and then the monad is the sign that is opposite to the personality. And the idea is that if you know the ray constituent of each sign, and that's well laid out in the 7 Rays treatise, you can actually see or get information regarding the use of energy in this lifetime for spiritual development. And further, to complete the keynote, the idea of the glamour is very much related to the concept of the dweller on the threshold, and that can be seen through the archetype, the esoteric archetype of Scorpio, Mars, and the 8th house. And a lot of my work is to help people to work on their astral bodies whilst they still work. You can do it in parallel. You work on your astral body and your personality while still working on building the rainbow bridge, and these two can go on. And so the astrology horoscope for me in esoteric terms gives me a lot of indications to help people with their work. If we could just show the lower part, please. The idea. I've studied some time with quantum physics. My own idea is that the allusion to quantum physics in observing a horoscope, which you can see there, and quite an important scientific discovery, has been the importance of observation. And so if we don't know our horoscope, it's like it is on the left there, it's a wavicular field and it's not known. But observation of that horoscope causes what the scientists believe is a collapse of that wave function into a particle. And so a particular interpretation of what was hitherto abstract is enabled, implying that getting to know our horoscope, we can actually change. The quantum physicists say that what we observe, we change, because there's a quantum energy comes out of our eyes and it concretes the abstract. And so I'm very keen that people who come for readings start to learn their abstract, visualize certain abstracts internally. That's observation on an internal level. And just to finish, really, this allusion to quantum physics in observing a horoscope is completely in line with the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. This idea of solipsism, that an observer is at the center of a universe which is itself a thought form in the mind of God. Now,
8 minutes 15, Ted, just to let you know.
Okay, just finishing it off then. Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days, is known as the Silent Watcher, and it could be that during a Manvantara, he is observing, and when that observation ceases, the creation collapses into Pralaya. That's just a higher correspondence. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me first of all apologise for prematurely collapsing your wave function, and I'm sure that we can come back to a lot of this a little later on. But to start off with, to keep us on common ground and relate what we're doing to the keynote, there are going to be a lot of people who only understand the basics of astrology. So I'd like to get to the actual fundamentals of it and the problems that exist, why a lot of intelligent thinking people wouldn't accept astrology. And one of those is, for instance, that the planets can affect us and various moods and that, yet when we look at the planets, they are very dead and lifeless in appearance. And the second thing is the nature of the zodiac. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what the zodiac is, because when you look at these patches of the sky and you see these stars there, the fact that they could come and have an effect on our little unimportant planet and have such important consequences is difficult for some people to accept. And I wondered, first of all, if there's a different way we can look at the zodiac in terms of the etheric body of the earth and the way that the rays and the creative hierarchies define that circumference, if you like, of the sphere of the earth's influence. So I don't know who wants to go first, but your just general idea on the zodiac, what it is exactly.
Ed, do
Maybe
you want to do it?
yeah. Yes, please, Evangeline.
Oh, maybe me. Okay. Okay, me. Okay, to begin with, it's difficult to accept that these lifeless bodies affect us because it is difficult to overcome our ego to begin with, and to accept that someone so distant or something so distant can have sway over our lives. So there's a psychological factor there at play. Beyond that, the fact that we are talking about energy, and it's well documented that the radiation from the planets just travels. We're talking about fields. It's like there are electrical and magnetic fields. We know now that the magnetic field of the sun encompasses the entire solar system. So everything is in it. That includes us. And in this field of relationship, things travel from one place to the other. This has been documented for us in the material of astrology since time immemorial. But of course, it's documented in a language that was appropriate to its time. And I think that this in itself may be off-putting for some people. Because if you read astrology and in the language of like the Middle Ages or Hellenistic era, or even further back in the Egyptian era, it's not going to speak to you. You will find it infantile and you'll find it irrelevant. However, it documents energy. And if we take that energy and translate it to what's happening today and to our own terms, our modern terms, then we have something worthwhile.
So what you're saying really is like an extension of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you're saying,
I am saying well beyond that,
yeah,
because the electromagnetic spectrum and the range of radiation we are now observing is just what we can observe. Mm-hmm. It's not everything that exists.
We're going into smaller and smaller frequencies, aren't we? Into gamma rays. So beyond that, perhaps there will start to be energies and smaller wavelengths that correspond with moods and emotions. And it can be posited that a psychology could start to evolve from that, where various configurations of these bodies emit radiation that does cause certain tendencies.
I think it's already happening.
Yeah, sure. So I'd say to you, Ted, I mean, that's a good start. But, a devil's advocate question to you would be, well, okay, I'm a Libran, but astronomically, because of the precession of the equinoxes, we know that's not true. I was born in the sign of Virgo. Furthermore, the sun, it doesn't divide up into equal 30 degrees. For instance, the sun takes 5 or 6 days to pass through Scorpio and around 30 days to pass through Taurus. So how can that be reconciled? Say if a scientific mind was talking to you, how do you justify that?
Well, if I could just make a point, first of all, to continue what has been said previously, my understanding is, or my suggestion is, that the quantum world that has been discovered is in fact the etheric world. The classical physicists found out all the rules to do with the physical world, and we know the laws are different as you go smaller. And I'm quite sure that as we do go smaller and we find an even smaller particle, it will correspond to the astral world, an even smaller particle to the mental world, etc. But these waves, we entangle with these waves in our consciousness, in our sending out our consciousness life after life. We entangle with our waves with not only other people, but with the waves of all the planetary bodies. And so we get entanglements, and they are they are in the form of wave functions, and those wave functions are wave functions to be resolved. We create a matrix of energies in highly subtle matter that the ancient wisdom was talked about, of which science knows a little bit now. And that map is there, whether we understand the horoscope or not, it is there, and we do need to observe it. To come back to what you're saying about your sun in Libra, sun in Virgo, I have undertaken a serious study of Vedic astrology. And, you know, I'm sun in Aries, just like your sun in Virgo. But what I find is all roads lead to Rome. Exactly the same events are pinpointed in either astrology, whether you take the tropical zodiac or the sidereal. Now, I can't explain that, nor do I feel I need to understand it, other than we entangle ourselves with the energies that are coming in, be it from the zodiac, which is stepped down through the planets, etc. And of course, we can describe all of these energies as a good occultist in terms of the 7 rays. So I look at the zodiacal signs with great interest. I do tropical esoteric astrology, but I'm mindful also that there are other energies available in Vedic astrology. And by putting those 2 Eastern and Western approaches together, we probably get closer to the truth about the zodiac than we would using just one system.
I noticed in esoteric astrology that the Tibetan says, yes, sure, it's, you know, astrology is based really on illusion in one sense, and yet it is the most exact science around if your intuition is awakening. And one of the reasons for that, I guess, is because in around the time of Atlantis, I read that the hierarchy actually placed thought forms to do with the constellations on the mental plane, on the abstract mental plane, to condition humanity. So astrologers like yourselves, I imagine, are tapping into the thought forms that are created by the hierarchy and which they want to condition us. So in that sense, those energies are all there, and it is reality.
Right.
I think it is a grade of reality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I think when we talk about the zodiac, we are talking about something that has been constructed in a specific type of plane. But we have to keep in mind that because we are referring to sources that are alive, they are also active in different types of matter or in different types of consciousness. So I would say that the zodiac refers to a certain type of consciousness and energy, but there are others beyond that. And I think that the zodiac was sufficient up to now and will of course be useful for many years to come. But I think that we are now tasked to venture beyond that. And that's what why the call for intuitional astrology is so strong, because the zodiac is a glamour. It might be a very refined glamour, but it still remains a glamour. Whereas the work with the creative hierarchies directly, I think, is the future for us, because they are not glamour, they are reality. We are told very, very clearly that the constellations, the stars, the planets, even the zodiac, they are merely symbols. So they are manifestations on the physical plane of lives who have their lives, their beings, their center of focus on different planes. Whereas in contrast to that, the creative hierarchies are essentially the building blocks of reality itself. And so a much more direct way to relate to the reality of us. And another thing to keep in mind is that esoteric astrology refers to groups. And the higher group in the planet is the planet itself as a synthetic entity. This goes to your question about if I'm a Libra or if I'm an Aries. So let's say it's more important to determine what my affiliation is on the body of the planet what my group affiliation is, and discern the zodiac affiliation of this group, because this will give a truer appreciation of the energies one is influenced by. For example, I'm Greek. Greece allegedly is a sun in Capricorn. So this actually is a very, very, very valid and strong influence, like a fundamental influence. And on top of that, everything else becomes secondary, because if things happen to Greece, they will happen to me. In the same sense that if things happen to humanity, they will happen to me. If things happen to the planet, they will happen to me. So esoteric astrology needs to shift its attention a little bit more to what is happening to groups.
And also what's happening today as well, because one of the capabilities, Ted, that's required of the astrologer is the change that's always taking place, because astrology is based ultimately on motion, on orbits, lives going around lives, and as these are living beings, then to a certain extent they're going to change too, I would imagine, just like we all have our different moods and our different effects on people on a higher turn of the spiral, perhaps over longer periods of time. So the planets, and the beauty of astrology is that nothing is ever the same from one second to another. You only need about 5 celestial bodies to be in different relationship as they're spinning around and that, and you've got totally different vectors working. But to just come to Pluto for a second, what I found quite hilarious really was, I mean, Pluto was discovered, what, in 1930 or whatever? And as the power of Pluto then started to really come into humanity, we've decided psychologically, almost subconsciously, to demote it and make it a planetoid and no longer a planet. You know, is that a subconscious reaction to it and saying we can't take any more of this?
Yeah. Well, if I just answer that for you in a way, as I see it, Lawrence, is that yes, astrology delineates, you know, that time has qualities, and therefore, if we look at the quality of time in 2020, when we were going through the beginnings in this country of the pandemic, and we see that not only is Pluto in Capricorn, but Jupiter's in Capricorn and Saturn's in Capricorn as well. And we understand the ray constituents, so we can understand the planet through its energy. And we see masses and masses of will ray energy. And we know with Pluto, Shambhala, and with Vulcan in Capricorn as well, Shambhala is at work here, imposing its will. And I've just noticed the question in the chat that asks about a constructive collapsing of Pluto's wave function, so that perhaps humanity can't be so endangered by this. This is the will of Shambhala. They see and they destroy what they know that mankind has created in an unspiritual way. So yes, we've got to be mindful at any point that in 2020, this planet was pelted with will ray energy with virtually no let-up. And Pluto will remain in Capricorn until 2025. And I think it was Evangelia who said that she looks at progress charts. In the progress chart, we can look at the changing times for an individual and see, you know, exactly when there's going to be life rattling their cage, or life leaving them alone, or a crisis in this area, an opportunity in that area. And so it's not just the natal chart, it's the progress chart that is equally as important, and the idea that time has qualities, and we have to be mindful of course, of cycles as well, and that even the new group of world service has to work to cycles. And I think something was alluded to that in some of the conference literature, that we're now entering a cycle of tension and expansion, and this will give us opportunity, but we need to know what the energy is to be able to handle it.
Creative opportunity is a lovely way of looking at astrology, isn't it? You know, it moves us away from what you see in the daily newspapers of what's going to happen to us, and we're sort of you know, blown around by the winds of fortune and misfortune, like, you know, a beach ball, whatever. But it's interesting to think through, though, just how much our astrological time cycle will give us both creative opportunity. But would we miss it, for instance, you know, about a third of a lot of births these days are not natural births, they're cesarean. And so if your soul is planning an incarnation and your rising sign in particular, positioning of the planets is needed to be photographed onto your consciousness at birth, it's going to be considerably different, I'd have thought, in a caesarean birth. Do you think this in some way undermines the plan of the soul? Maybe I should go to Evangelia first, as it's her turn. Or do you think in some way that this can be compensated for?
Very funny, because that's a discussion I'm having all the time. And I think it's the apex of personality arrogance to believe that it can influence the soul's choice of moment to emerge. What I'm saying is that cesarean section is just a development that happened in the 20th century, and maybe 5 centuries from now, it will be yet even more a more sci-fi way of birth. I can't see that affecting the way that soul groups come into incarnation. It
Sure,
is very,
the big picture.
yes, it is just very evident to me that as progress is happening, progress is taken into account. I mean, what is happening on the planet at this moment is not something that the higher planes are unaware of.
So the bigger picture then really, of course, brings us to sort of Aquarius, of course, which is the other big discussion everybody's having. When do we move into Aquarius? Have we done so? But putting that to one side, of course, the wonderful energies, the uplifting energy is of Jupiter, that beneficent expansion, and using Uranus with its control of the ethers, the planet of the violet force, to stamp divine reasoning into matter and to bring order around. There's tremendous opportunities with this age, and it'd be interesting to hear what both of you would highlight as being the opportunities at around this particular time with all the crises the world is going through. Ted?
Well, I would say that although it's not mentioned by name in the externalization of the hierarchy, the Tibetan talks about the important formation of a group, which I understand is the ashram of synthesis. And it kind of goes back to what Matthew was saying, and he was talking about religion earlier, and the use of the sixth ray, which is generally speaking, I know it's slightly different from what's called the Department of Religion. I understand that. We take the religious ray to bring down an idealism and a devotion that now has to be spiritualized by bringing it through into matter. And it's this ashram of synthesis made up of Ray 1, the Master Moira's ashram, Ray 2, Kutumi Dwaj Kul, and Ray 7, Master H, not yet in incarnation, but previously the Master Rakowski. That these three energies, nothing to do with the sixth ray anymore, these three energies, 1, 2, and 7, are the ones that are going to lead us through into the age of Aquarius. So there's our triangle of energies, 1, 2, and 7. They're all synthetic energies in one way or another, as I see them, hence the name of the ashram of synthesis. And we have to go through points of tension where we're able to integrate rays 1, 2, and 7 into our being. And we can do that by looking at our horoscopes and seeing where the rays 1, 2, and 7 fit into the mapping of our own particular horoscope, and see where the work needs to be done for ourselves. And so the opportunity for us is to say, no longer can we just have spiritual concepts. No longer can we just use meditation. We've got to bring that spiritual energy down from 1 to 7 and actually change not only our kingdom, but change with our radiatory, which is very seventh ray, with our radiatory auras. We've got to change all the kingdoms of nature and lift everything up towards the group initiation of the first initiation for humanity. So it's a massive task, but I do not believe it's related to religion and the sixth ray. It's related to the combination of rays 1, 2, and 7 the synthesis of those rays, and the moving away from ideas of devotion and idealism towards the idea of making this world ultimately a heaven on earth. But we have to clear the way with drastic means, maybe in the coming years, and maybe up to 2025, before we can start to have the seeds of that 2,500 years in front of us.
Evangelia?
Well, let's begin by saying that the shift in eras is a shift of 2 millennia. So one couldn't expect that there is a fixed point of one day or 1 year when this is going to happen. There is a massive overlay of energies where, like, the 6th, the outgoing ray, the Piscean ray, and the 7th, the incoming Aquarius, are like that. And in my opinion, this began in the beginning of the 20th century. And well, the crash, the 2 world wars, which basically brought down the previous world order as we knew it. And it is ongoing, actually. I think that the first phase of transition was completed sometime in the beginning of the 21st century. And I think that now we are officially at a point, at a midpoint governed by Libra, Aquarius, and Aquarius over, Libra under. And we are trying to find, let's say, the balance between the incoming energies and the outgoing energies. But I think this transition will not be complete for maybe another century or so. On the other hand, this is a very fortuitous point in time to be in incarnation, because this transition means that all the energies are still available. There is the 6th ray energy available, there is the 7th incoming ray available, and shortly the 4th ray will also be available. That means that we have a choice to align with many different things and utilize many different things in order to bring into manifestation exactly what Ted said, to merge the theory, the 6th ray theory and idealism, with the physical manifestation and practical approach with the occultism of the 7th ray. I'd say that if one observes the latest generations, they are very hands-on and very matter of fact. And I think that the 7th ray influences are very, very evident in them. And that's why they find the world that we have created for them very frustrating and disappointing.
Certainly seem to be, as a race, at 6s and 7s. You know, we have quite a division between the two in one sense, and it's bringing them together, isn't it? Because I don't think, you know, it's nice to have something good to say about Pisces, you know, because a 12th of the population are Piscean, and they're probably, you know, this focus on Aquarius all the time. There's still a place for them, isn't there? And Pisces, the power of Pisces and the 6th ray as well, you know, is still has all the valuable lessons that we've learned from that period to take through and to merge with the 7th ray and the Aquarian age. The whole of the etheric network of the planet, you know, is one global brain now. And you can see how really the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence are there representing humanity, and the battle is on. As you were saying, Evangelia, it's an amazing time to be alive because there is so much energy on the planet now that things are going to have to be resolved one way or another. So hopefully there's a lot of optimism that you both have. Do you, Ted?
Yeah, I think the interesting point you made, you had said something nice about Pisces. I mean, you know, absolutely, you know, it's a sign of the savior and it's the sign of sacrifice, and there's all these very high ideals. I think the thing is that we've had so many lifetimes in Pisces, we build in by atavism these very, very strong Piscean tendencies that lead us to the devotion and this type of thing. And you know, evolution is telling us there's something else now. As you say, take with you what has gone through in the age of Pisces, and take through all those beautiful qualities of, the wonderful symbol that I was given in meditation once was a mother pelican pecking the breast of herself to feed her chicks that had no other food. And you think about that self-sacrifice and the Christian religion in particular. These were marvelous things that we were taught, but on the turn of the wheel, we've got to go around and embrace a new energy. So don't hang on to the old energy in the way that we act and the way that we perform our lifetimes anymore, but actually see to the new way of spiritualizing matter and see what we can do on a radiation basis. What can we radiate out that changes and adds value to people's lives and lifts the consciousness? And yes, I think the battle is on, because a lot of people don't know about this. And I think a lot of people, because of numbers of lifetimes lived, we had the avatars in front of us and we may be in the middle, but there are people with less lifetimes on the planet than us, and they're going to need to be shown the way. Whereas we may have had the opportunity in previous life to do some discipleship work, and therefore we're more in the vanguard. We've still got a responsibility to all those other people to show them.
Evangelia?
Oh, I don't know what to say. I'm very optimistic, but I have to say that my optimism stems from a notion that, a notion of a deep belief in the plan. Other than that, what I can say is that Aquarius energy is a very difficult energy for humanity, because it's all well to talk about collective living and group ideals, but in reality, that is very harsh on the personality, because it means conforming to what is truly for the best of the group, and not what one believes or thinks is in the best interest of the group. And I think that that is a very difficult transition, and that's exactly one that we're going through, because with the ongoing pandemic, Aquarius really made its presence felt, binding humanity together in an organism. And I think much of humanity didn't like that very much. However, this is the energy of Aquarius. The energy of Aquarius just asks everyone to do what is needed of them in the interest of the group. And for many of us during the pandemic, that was just sitting at home and trying to do nothing and not despair. For others, it meant working around the clock. But I think this might have been a very strong show of the Aquarian energy. As far as the idealism, as far as the Piscean era, okay, there isn't enough that can be said about Pisces. I mean, Pisces is at this point the sign that synthesizes the energies of all the other 11 signs. Ultimately, it's one of the signs of synthesis. So what we need to do is, of course, we need to safeguard what we learned in Pisces. And what we learned was to aspire to unity, to aspire to better things. These wouldn't have been possible. Even the notion of one humanity wouldn't be possible as an idea, as a concept, were it not for the Piscean energy. And I don't think what Pisces gave us is going to vanish in thin air. I think it's just a matter of bringing it a little bit further down into the physical plane through the energy of Aquarius. So basically, instead of talking about unity and doing what's best for the good of the group when it suits us, now with Aquarius, we have an opportunity to prove it in practice. I mean, I know I've gained so much weight in the pandemic, and that wasn't nice, but I needed to stay at home, you know. There was not to be done. I didn't see my friends, I didn't see my family, but there was not to be done. That's what was required of me. And I think that this effect is going to be strengthened as we further venture into the new energy of Aquarius. So that's a good thing to keep in mind for all esotericists, that group living isn't always pleasant.
Crisis, tension, emergence, and we can expect a lot more of that on the way. Which is good. Now, we've got a couple of people with their hands up. Should we try one? Maya, is the chat open? If it's not, we could open that up. Maya Costley, do you want to try unmuting yourself and your question?
We've lost her.
She's gone.
Have you gone, Maya? Rosemary then. Rosemary Steele? Can you unmute yourself, Rosemary? Is there anything I have to do?
That's what I was trying to do.
Oh, here we go.
She's in the chat.
Okay.
I'm afraid I put my hand up accidentally earlier and took it down again. But I would like to thank you both very much indeed. You've clarified a lot of things about the current now, and Pluto especially. Now that we've been told dark matter is affecting the light coming to Earth, it's deflecting it. It makes sense of Pluto as well, being the dark matter within ourselves that we have to move and get past. So thank you very much. I don't know how to unmute myself again, I'm sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? Let's have a look in. We've got another 3 up here. Okay, then. Francesca Acacia.
Can you listen to me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to thank all of you for the wonderful event, because it was really rich, and your opinion, both of Tad and Evangelia, were really interesting. I was interested in particular in one of the slides of Tad when he was explaining us the seeing of our horoscope and interpreted as something that changed. So our consciousness, this is the way in which I have interpreted, is actually changing and make us conscious of what we are called to do. And at the same time, when we are conscious about something, we can move always upward, in the sense that if the zodiac is an illusion put from the year, sorry, I have always difficulty with this word, hierarchy.
We understand you.
Hierarchy, sorry.
We understand you.
And if there is another one, the energy beyond this zodiac are more powerful, but we can have access to them if we are not became conscious of this level, the one with the 12 sign. And so probably in this period, and this was actually when my question is probably that this became conscious of the energy of Aquarius is like a door, a gate from which we can move in the other zodiac that is behind this.
Okay, Francesca, let's give Ted and Evangelia a chance to respond to that. If they have any comment to add to that, or would you like to go to the next one?
I didn't quite catch the question, but if I could make a couple of comments. If we see the energy, we have to observe the energy and know what we're dealing with. So I think it's important, those triangles I showed you, to be able to know what those energies are and see those energies as conditioning energies. My understanding is that we are beings to be liberated. And if by working through the energy matrix that's presented to us, So for me, if my monadic sign is Scorpio, which means discipleship, I'll damn well sign up for the Arcane School because I know they do good discipleship courses. And I was involved in Christian discipleship before that, and I've been involved in discipleship through Douglas Baker's astrology group as well. And this idea of discipleship is important to me because I'm going to strengthen, as I understand it, the link with the monad, which is going to, as we know, after the soul's done its mediating work at the third initiation, we're going to move on. But in the meantime, I've got to look at my Leo, my sun in Leo, and see that that's to do with the heart. And I've had certain challenges to do with the heart personally. And I now know that selfish solar plexus emotion won't work. I know that unconditional joy at the heart and embracing mankind will work and is the way forward. And so by fulfilling these energies, we can transcend them. And that's the idea. See what our conditioning is and transcend it. And it may well be somebody I had 7 planets in Aquarius, they just want to work for humanity. That's their conditioning. And once they fulfill that conditioning, but if you don't know, you can't change and transform. I hope that helps.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I add something?
Sure, of course.
Okay, Francisco, one thing to realize about working with any type of force or energy is that one needs a tool to work with it. And that means that one has to have a degree of coherence, to have the type of matter, the degree of matter that they want to work with built in their system. That means that all the energies and all the forces are perpetually and constantly available to us. And it's not a question of whether something else will open to us up as a humanity. It's a question of what we are able to come in relation with. And that is not the same for everyone. And it's not the same for all groups as well. It very much relies on several factors.
Okay, look, we'll take one more question from Wendy Boyd, and then I think we'll go into our meditation then, but then we'll go back to the chat box. And for those of you who would like to continue with this, we'll just open up and carry on for a while and see how we go, because there's a lot of interesting things in the chat room, but we've had our sort of session now, we've gone over that, but we can extend it after that. But just to finish off with you, Wendy.
Okay, thank you. Something that I've always been confused by, and I may be completely ignorant or got my facts wrong here, so please correct me, but what I just don't understand is that, okay, I've got my first planet, Aries, which I understand is the first ray, but then Mars is the 6th ray. So I find that I've never understood that as I'm reading. So does that mean that the 6th ray, Mars, is the personality problem, as the Tibetan talks about the personality problem and then the soul purpose, and the first ray, again, if I've got that right, is something to do with the soul purpose? I feel that if you can clarify that for me, then I might be able to understand a whole lot more.
We'll give you both Ted and Evangelia, if you could try and keep that quite succinct, just to deal with that, but then we'll have a concluding remarks, perhaps from you, Ted, and Evangelia, so we finish on a note that's related directly to the keynote.
Okay, can I just say, did you say you've got your Mars in Aries?
Yes. As I understand it, maybe not. So I always thought Mars was a first ray.
Okay.
It's not, is it? I just learned that.
Yes. No, Mars is rays 1, 4, and 6. So to keep it concise, basically all the energies of the signs can be correlated with the rays, and can the planets. And what we're looking at in a chart is a blending of these energies. So if you have Mars in Aries, there's a definite strong first ray influence from both Mars, or it's only 10%, and a bigger one, maybe 40% from Aries. And we'd have to sit down and go through this with you in some detail. But unless you know some rudimental things about the rays, it's going to be difficult to give you an answer and straighten it out. But I'm very happy to talk to you. No cost involved at all. If you want to get in touch with me personally, I'm sure Gianni would be the
As
same.
Evangelia, I'm sure you'd extend that same invitation too.
Well, the only thing I have to say is that in every person's horoscope, there are all the signs and there are all the planets. So it depends what one is after when they're looking at them. They signify different centers on the etheric body. They signify centers on other bodies, because there are centers on other bodies as well, the emotional and the mental body. And they're signifying the relationships between all these factors. So without any further ado, it depends what you are working at any point in time, what you are using while working with it. There's not a single definitive answer that one can give to what you're asking.
Thanks. I wasn't trying to con you out of a free reading or anything.
No.
I was just interested.
It's very natural that you ask, but there is no definitive answer. The only definitive thing I can tell you is that your sun sign is much more important than your Mars sign.
Okay, thank you.
That's a sort of interesting type of question that's probably more appropriate after the meditation. Is there something perhaps for you, Ted, and then Evangelia, just concluding remarks perhaps on the revelation of divine love and the relation of astrology to it? Something for us to take away maybe into our meditation from both of you.
Okay, I would just say that having the tool of astrology allows us to look at both of those areas. And I do think there's a lot of work involved in both areas. The keynote is lovely in what it is asking, but I do believe that we have to work at it. And we work on our dweller through the 8th house and all the implications of the energies around that, in order to free ourselves from the dweller on the threshold, from the past, which will embody most of the glamours of our lives, and move away from lower astral energies. At the same time, we have to work on that bridge with the soul in order to bring through intuition. I'm talking as an occultist here, not a mystic who goes up and brings it down the other way. I'm talking about working through higher manas. And working with astrology, and as a tool, we become more able to maybe visualize aspects, meditate on them, reflect, contemplate, etc., and use that energy to build the monastic bridge, which will lead us to the higher intuition. So I think astrology will help us with both ends of the keynote, but it's hard work. I found it hard work anyway.
Evangelia?
Well, the only thing I have to say is that venturing into astrology just makes you realize the degree of interrelation and unity there is, and between larger and larger and larger and more expansive areas in time and space. And I think that brings about love, because you realize that you are a part of bigger and bigger things, and that makes the people that are closer in like the smaller groups that you're part of, like the planetary group, feel so much more like kin to you. So I think that the further out we're going with astrology, the closer to us, the people in our own planet and our own solar system, begin to look.
Lovely. Well, thanks both of you for that discussion, which was clearly from the chat, everybody found that very inspiring.